Number 8. Eileen Lois. Usually when old war vehicles are found, their ID numbers help historians unlock stories from their past. But in 2013, a B-17 bomber and its crew were identified by one woman's name. Between 1939 and 1945, many servicemen in World War II spent years away from their families back home, many of them unsure if or when they'd return. It was common for soldiers to carry pictures with them, or in this case, carve or paint their name into a plane they worked on. Deep in Europe's Lake Bolsena, divers found the gun turret of a B-17 bomber after 69 years. Most of the wreck was in pieces on the lake bed, but one thing stood out: the name Eileen Lois lovingly painted on the metal turret's side. Using this name, researchers at the International Group for Historic Aircraft Discovery had a big clue about the origins of the plane. They found out that this name had been painted by Sergeant Ralph Truesdale to honor his pregnant wife back home. Eileen wasn't the only lucky lady to get featured on the B-17 bomber. Divers also found the name Ethel painted too, the sweetheart of a gunner named Anthony Brodniak. The B-17 bomber went down under heavy gunfire on January 15, 1944, when it was intercepted on its way to destroy a railway bridge in Certaldo, Italy. All of the crew managed to parachute out, but sadly 7 of them were immediately caught and imprisoned by Germans. But what about Anthony and Ralph? Did they make it back to their loved ones? We know they were not among the 7 of the 10 crew members that were caught. Anthony managed to hide out in Italy thanks to kind-hearted Italian families in Rome until Allied help came on June 4, 1944. Ralph evaded capture for a while but was eventually sent to a prison camp. Thankfully, he escaped after a month and managed to stay hidden until he was rescued. Number 7. Sergeant Bell's Bomber. In 1943, a short Sterling bomber BK-716 flown by Sergeant Charles Armstrong Bell and his crew made its final journey after a bombing run over Germany. It never made it home. In 2020, 77 years after the plane disappeared and the men on board were marked MIA, a discovery was made in Lake Markermeer in the Netherlands near Amsterdam. Investigators located the bomber at the bottom of the lake, where it had landed after getting shot down by enemy troops. Unfortunately, the crew had not been able to escape, so the hunt to identify the men and find their living relatives was underway. 2 of the crew were Canadian, but the main focus was on the pilot, Charles Armstrong Bell, who was originally from County Durham, England. Another sergeant, this time from the Consett Police Constabulary, searched for any living relatives of Armstrong Bell who could attend his burial. They managed to uncover relatives of not only Charles Armstrong Bell, but another man from the plane, Sergeant Ronald Kennedy. Thanks to these efforts, family members of both servicemen got the chance to fly to the Netherlands and attend a ceremony to honor the men and a memorial dedicated to them. Number 6. Liberator 589D. Gander Lake in Canada is extremely deep with temperatures nearing 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Under its surface on the dark lake bed is a B-24 Liberator bomber which has been resting since 1943. The plane wasn't shot down in any combat, but instead tragically crashed while taking off. One of its engines failed, forcing the aircraft to make a barrel roll mid-air and end up in the cold lake. A rescue effort was sent out, but when the plane started slipping further underwater, they had to call it off. All 4 of the crew on board perished. In 2022, the plane, a Liberator 5X9D, was uncovered again, 164 feet below the surface after 3D scans of the lakebed allowed the Royal Canadian Geographical Society to figure out its location. Jill Heinerth was one of the divers who went down to photograph the Liberator. It wasn't an easy dive. Heinerth commented on how dark the water was and how the lake conditions weren't exactly the best for diving. The wreck of the Liberator 5X9D was upside down with some of its equipment scattered around, including a turret gun lying next to its old ammunition belts. The dive team was able to bring closure to the families of 3 crew members, Wing Commander J.M. Young, Flying Officer V.E. Bill, and Leading Aircraftman G. Ward. The body of the 4th crew member, Squadron Leader John G. McKenzie, was recovered at the time of the crash back in 1943. Number 5. RAAF Bomber. Ex-Army pilot Jim Miles and Dr. Silvano Young, an archaeologist, got some coffee in Darwin, Australia. But this was not a casual meeting between friends. This would lead to the discovery of a World War II plane, the A-7280. Dr. Young handed Jim an old photo from 1945 of a flaming wreck on the sea. They had worked together before while finding a lost steamer, and Young hoped Jim could find out where the plane in the picture ended up. Back on March 23, 1945, A-7280 had taken off from Truscott Airfield, a top-secret Australian Air Force base, for a bombing raid over Indonesia. Sadly, it crashed only a few miles into its journey. Only 3 of the 12-men crew were recovered at the time, although sadly none made it out alive. The rescue effort was a struggle, since the waters near the airfield had strong tides and were patrolled by crocodiles and sharks. After a dive in 2009, Jim Miles found the wreck using the photo. He was stunned by the condition the plane was in, especially since its tires from the landing gear were still intact. Using a piece of metal from its engine, he confirmed that he was indeed looking at the A7280. Since then, Miles has completed more dives at the site, capturing videos to show what it looks like today and bringing closure to the families of the crew. The Adelaide River War Cemetery already has a memorial to them, but some relatives, like David Hursthouse, the son of one of the crew, John Hursthouse, want a memorial to be erected at Truscott Airfield, the place that marked the men's final journey. Would you ever dive to a wreck site like this one? Tell us in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 4. The Short Sterling washed to shore. On December 17, 1942, the short Sterling bomber called the Bf-396 and its 8 crew members got into a scrap with a German night fighter in European skies. The German aircraft won the fight and the short Sterling Mk1 was lost. 80 years later, in February 2022, the plane resurfaced as large pieces of it began washing up on shore of a Camperduin beach in the Netherlands. At first, those who found the rusting metal shards were unsure what it was, but over time and as larger pieces appeared, they were able to figure out that it was a British bomber, and then followed this lead to the actual aircraft. Markings that read AM, standing for Air Ministry, on some of the parts led Martin Visser of the Egmont Foundation to understand that it was a British plane. Then, by comparing the fragments to one of the surviving Sterling bombers in the Netherlands, they confirmed it. As only 3 short Sterlings had crashed in and around the country, they were then able to cross-reference the location of each incident to find out exactly which plane it was. Sadly, the crew on board were so close to landing safely at home in England, but never did. Visser noted that normally the Dutch coast was a safe area with little anti-air resistance, but not in this case. At least now, many years later, we finally have closure on the final flight of this great war machine. Number 3. C-53 Skytrooper Dakota. On November 19, 1946, the Gauley Glacier in Switzerland's Bernese Alps claimed a prize from the skies. Flying at an altitude of 11,000 feet, the C-53 Skytrooper Dakota, a transport plane carrying some senior U.S. military officials and their relatives from Austria to Italy, collided with the glacier thanks to poor visibility. It was a long descent down to the ground. Despite this calamity, none of the 12 people on board lost their lives, although a few suffered injuries. With the crew and passengers successfully rescued, the Skytrooper's wreckage was left to be covered by the snow. The next sighting of the plane would be 66 years later, when melting snow allowed its propeller to become visible 6 years later in 2018. High temperatures and a hot summer melted the glacier's ice, leading to the rest of the plane emerging from its icy bed. The plane lies in fragments, with many pieces of crumpled metal scattered about and on its fuselage. Some pieces look skeletal in their appearance, with supporting metal beams laying bare without a covering. At this time, there are no plans to recover the plane, but maybe as we see warmer weather in upcoming years, more adventurers will get the chance to see it on their mountain hikes. Number 2. The B26 Marauder. A chance discovery by Eric Weiberg as a teenager would lead to closure for 2 families. Eric spent time between both the US and the Bahamas. One day, while out on a boat with a friend in 1985, he spotted the wheel of a plane under the water. The wheel made Eric curious, and in the next few years he ended up researching many planes that crashed around the Bahamas in World War II. Although he had not seen it since he was young, Eric strongly believed the wheel belonged to a B-26 Marauder that had been piloted by Canadians Maurice O'Neill and Jack Wood. Eric then set out to try and find the wheel of the plane again after many years. He didn't find it, but instead found the wreck site of a Beechcraft plane. But he continued searching. Using eyewitness testimony from the time of the crash all the way back to October 1944, he narrowed down his search to a smaller strip of ocean. For 3 weeks, Eric showed his dedication to finding the B-26 Marauder by free-diving 5 hours a day. Eventually, he made a breakthrough. On Remembrance Day, November 11th, he came across the first pieces of the lost plane. Surprisingly, it was almost 2 miles away from where it should have been according to military records. Carrying out further dives, Eric collected over 45 pieces of the B-26. Eric's discovery brought closure to the families of O'Neill and Wood, contacting both their nephew and niece respectively to let them know the news. They're now planning to hold a memorial service at the beach in Nassau to honor the lost men. Number 1. The P30 Under A Glacier. During World War II, a squadron of planes went down over Greenland. They became known as the Lost Squadron. The American fighter planes, 6 P-38 Lightnings, bombers, and 2 B-17s would remain covered by ice and snow for over 70 years, but they're slowly starting to get rediscovered thanks to the efforts of a businessman named Jim Salazar. Using radar technology mounted on a drone, the team was able to pinpoint the location of a P-38 fighter in July 2018. But it wasn't on the surface, so getting to it would not be easy since it was submerged under 300 feet of glacial ice. To truly confirm the location, the crew sent down a thermal probe which melted and pierced through the ice. When they brought it back up, it was covered in hydraulic oil. They'd found it. Thanks to modern technology, Salazar and his team were able to find the P-38 quickly, after only 6 or 7 minutes of drone flight. If they had done it by hand on a sled, it would have taken 6 or 7 hours instead. This might not sound like too big of a time scale, but when you're faced with freezing temperatures and the threat of polar bears lurking about, it's a big help. The discovered fighter has also been confirmed as a P-38 Echo manned by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wilson of the Army Air Corps. Thankfully, Wilson and his crew survived, but others who crashed or made emergency landings in the area weren't so lucky. This P-38 Echo joins another plane from the lost squadron that has also been discovered. Another P-38 Glacier Girl was uncovered in 1992 and has since been restored to flying condition. The hope is that Echo can one day be recovered and join its companion in the skies.
6. HMS Audacious. Just off the coast of Ireland, in the Atlantic Ocean, forgotten shipwrecks litter the seafloor like discarded toys. Some of these ships date back to the First World War and were sunk by torpedoes and mines. Included in the wreckage are merchant vessels, submarines, and ocean liners. One of the vessels is the HMS Audacious. On October 16, 1914, the Royal Navy's 2nd Battle Squadron was sent to the western coast of Scotland. They departed for gunnery practice off of Tory Island, and on the morning of October 27th, the Audacious was struck by a mine at 8:45 a.m. Assuming they were hit by a torpedo, the submarine warning was triggered, which forced them to abandon the smaller ships behind to provide assistance. The engine room and outer compartments adjoining it flooded immediately. After failed attempts to successfully tow the 597-foot behemoth, the Audacious heeled, paused, then capsized after taking water for 12 hours. The Titanic's sister ship, the White Star ocean liner RMS Olympic, was able to rescue all but one unlucky soul. Darren Norton, an Irish chemist, was fortunate to experience the wrecks on a dive. He confirmed that most of the wrecks lie beyond the reach of recreational divers. Historical England believes there are about 40,000 shipwrecks around the coast of the British Isles, still waiting to be discovered. 5. SS Eastland. Commissioned by the Michigan Steamship Company in 1902, the Eastland made her inaugural voyage in 1903. With a hint of foreshadowing, its first inaugural season did not go smooth sailing. On July 27th, the Eastland struck the laid-up tugboat George W. Gardner at a dock near Lake Street Bridge. While only taking minor damages herself, George W. Gardner sank. Jumping to July of 1915, the Eastland and 4 other Great Lakes steamers were tasked with chartering employees from Western Electric Company's Hawthorne Works in Cicero, Illinois, to a company picnic located in Michigan City, Indiana. The Eastland was so top-heavy that she required special restrictions concerning the number of passengers it could carry. Since the Titanic sank a mere 3 years prior, the Seamen's Act had been passed. The Seamen's Act required a full set of lifeboats to be retrofitted on passenger vessels. This additional weight made Eastland more dangerous by taking on more weight, and some argued that other great ships would suffer from this problem as well. Regardless, the act was signed into law. At 6:30 a.m. in the morning of July 24th, passengers began to board the Eastland on the south bank of the Chicago River. By 7:10 a.m., the ship's capacity of 2,572 passengers was reached. With so many passengers on the packed ship standing on the upper decks, it began to lean slightly away from the dock. After futile attempts to stabilize the ship, it only took 20 minutes for the Eastland to lean sharply, then roll to its side. Nearly half of it was submerged. The cool and damp weather had brought many passengers below deck to warm themselves, leading to hundreds of passengers being trapped inside by the water. Others were unfortunately crushed by heavy furniture during the rollover. In spite of the tragedy only being 20 feet from the dock and assistance from the nearby vessel Kenosha, a total of 844 passengers and 4 crew members perished in the disaster. 4. USS Saratoga. The USS Saratoga was the 5th U.S. Navy ship named after the 1777 Battle of Saratoga, an important victory during the Revolutionary War. She was originally authorized in 1916 as a Lexington-class battlecruiser. However, after suspending construction, she was reclassified as an aircraft carrier before entering service in 1928. The ship's flight deck was 866 feet 2 inches long, comprised of teak wood, and was designed to carry 78 aircraft, including 36 bombers. However, these numbers increased when the Navy adopted the practice of securing spare aircraft in the unused spaces at the top of the hangar. USS Saratoga participated in a number of battles including World War II, the Guadalcanal campaign, and the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. While under repair after being torpedoed on 11 January 1942, Saratoga received a 7-foot 2-inch bulge on the starboard side of her hull. The primary intent was to increase the ship's buoyancy, allow her full fuel capacity to be utilized, and to increase stability. It was also used to store additional fuel oil. Operation Crossroads was a test conducted at Bikini Atoll and hoped to evaluate the effect of atomic bombs on ships. Before going to Bikini, Saratoga sailed from San Francisco. She departed from Pier 33 and headed out the Golden Gate on May 1, 1946. Operation Crossroads began with an air burst test on July 1st. Saratoga survived with only minor damage, including the igniting of the teak flight deck. The second test on July 25th was an underwater blast and exploded about 400 yards under the carrier. The detonation caused the vessel to lift out of the water, knocking everything off its flight deck. Recently, the submerged wreckage, which lies 50 feet below the surface, has become a destination for scuba divers. Is it better to test atomic bombs on our own ships in a controlled environment, or save them until we absolutely need to use them to limit radiation exposure? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. 3. MV Dona Paz. Built in 1963, the MV Dona Paz was built by Onomichi Zosen of Hiroshima, Japan, and was originally named Himeyuri Maru. When she traveled through Japanese waters, her passenger capacity was 608. The vessel was sold to Sulpicio Lines in October 1975 and was renamed Don Sulpicio, serving the Manila to Cebu sector as her primary route. The ship became one of the company's 2 flagship vessels. On June 5, 1979, Dona Paz was devastated by fire on her usual Manila-Cebu journey. All 1,164 aboard were rescued, but the vessel was beached and declared a total loss. The wreckage was repurchased and repaired by Sulpicio Lines. Structural changes were made, and she returned to service under the new name of Dona Paz. The Dona Paz was reassigned to serve the Manila to Tacloban route, making voyages twice a week until the time of her sinking. Dona Paz departed from Tacloban for Manila at 6:30 a.m. on December 20, 1987. The vessel was due in Manila at 4 a.m. the next day, and it was reported that it last made radio contact at about 8 p.m. Subsequent reports indicated that she did not have a radio. At about 10:30 p.m., while most of the passengers slept, Dona Paz collided with MT Vector. MT was carrying 1,050,000 liters of gasoline and other petroleum-based products. Vector's cargo ignited upon collision, which started a fire that spread to the Dona Paz. One of these survivors recounted that the flames spread rapidly throughout the ship and that the surrounding sea was also on fire. To make matters worse, no life vests could be found, and the crewmen were running around in panic alongside passengers. The passengers were forced to jump off the ship, with some using suitcases as makeshift flotation devices and swimming among charred bodies in flaming waters around the ship. Dona Paz sank within 2 hours. MS Don Claudio witnessed the explosion of the 2 ships and found the survivors about an hour later. In all, only 26 survivors were rescued, with 24 being passengers of the Dona Paz. Manifest showed Dona Paz was carrying 1,583 passengers at the time of its demise. No Dona Paz crew member survived. Most of those rescued received burns from jumping into the flaming water. Reportedly, it took about 8 hours for maritime authorities to learn about the accident and another 8 hours to begin search and rescue operations. 2. RMS Carpathia. The RMS Carpathia was built by CS Swan & Hunter for the Cunard Steamship Company to operate between Liverpool and Boston. Construction began on September 10, 1901, with a voyage from the River Tyne to the River Mersey between April 22 and 25, 1903. At the time of her launch, she was described as being 558 feet long and weighing in at 13,500 tons. The vessel was designed with 4 complete steel decks, a bridge deck, saloon, cabins, and had a capacity of 1,700 passengers. Despite being designed for second and third class passengers, the Carpathia's interior was quite comfortable and set a standard for the time. The dining saloon was said to be decorated in gold and cream and was capped with a stained glass dome. Although she lacked the speed and grand luxury of express liners, she quickly developed a reputation as a comfortable ship and became popular with immigrants and tourists alike. Carpathia was updated in 1905, which increased her capacity to 2,550 passengers. Carpathia is best known for saving survivors from the Titanic. On the night of April 15, 1912, witness operator Harold Cotton had missed previous messages from the Titanic. When his shift ended at midnight, he continued to stand post before bed. At 12:11 a.m., a message was sent to the Titanic. The response was a distress signal stating they'd struck an iceberg and needed urgent assistance. It took the Carpathia 3.5 hours to arrive at the Titanic's location, which was about 67 miles from his position. Arriving on scene at about 4 a.m., an hour and a half after the Titanic sank, claiming 1,500 lives. Over the next 4.5 hours, the vessel took on the 705 survivors from Titanic's lifeboats. The crew was awarded multiple medals for their rescue work, including bronze medals, officer silver medals, and a silver cup and gold medal awarded to Captain Rostron. In the First World War, Carpathia was used to transport American expeditionary forces and Canadians to Europe. Among her passengers was Frank Buckles, who would become the last surviving American veteran of the Great War. Carpathia sailed from Liverpool to Boston in a convoy carrying 57 passengers on July 15, 1918. On the morning of July 17th, the convoy was cut in half, and she continued west with 6 other ships, being the largest in the convoy. An incoming torpedo was spotted, but the attempts to dodge it were unsuccessful. The impact was followed by a second which penetrated the engine room, killing 5 crew members and voiding any attempts to escape. When the battle died down and Carpathia settled, the order was given to abandon ship. 218 of the 223 aboard were rescued. She sank at 11 a.m., about an hour and a half after the torpedo struck. At the time of her sinking, she was on the 5th Cunard steamship sunk in as many weeks. The wreckage was discovered by Keith Jessup on September 9, 1999. 1. Endurance. Built under supervision of master wood shipbuilder Christian Jacobson, the Endurance's original purpose was as an ice-capable steam yacht. It provided luxurious accommodations for small tourist and hunting parties in the Arctic. The 144-foot yacht was launched on December 17, 1912, and included 10 passenger cabins, a smoking room, a spacious dining saloon, and even a darkroom so passengers could develop photographs. Although her hull looked like that of any other vessel of comparable size, it was not. Endurance was designed with very sturdy construction to withstand polar conditions, with twice as many frames as normal, and the frames being of double thickness. The bow was designed to meet the ice head-on and had been given special attention. Each timber had been made from a single oak tree, chosen for its shape so that its natural shape followed the curve of the ship's design. At the time of her launch in 1912, Endurance was arguably among the strongest wooden ships ever built. Built for the ice, her hull was considered by many of her crew to be far too rounded for the open ocean. She was not intended to be frozen into heavy pack ice and wasn't designed to rise out of a crush. It was observed on the expedition that she instead tended to resist being crushed, and instead the ice cracked to relieve the pressure. On December 5, 1914, Endurance sailed from Grytviken on the island of South Georgia, heading for the southern regions of the Weddell Sea. After nearly a year of pushing its way through ice packs, in the late afternoon of October 24, 1915, the ship was disabled by waves, pinning her between two icebergs. The stern slammed into a large mass of ice, tearing the stem post away from the hull. Not long after, the bow planking was compromised, causing flooding in both the engine room and the forward hold. Neither the manual pumps nor the main man-powered deck pumps could help against the rising water. The footplates to the engine room would no longer sit in place, as the side of the ship was bowing inward by up to 6 inches. The ship was abandoned on October 27th, and they established a camp about 2 miles from the remains. On November 13th, the icebergs were hit by pressure waves, squeezing and crushing the hull. As more pressure waves hit the ice on November 21st, within the span of a minute, the Endurance was lifted as the icebergs shifted towards one another. As the pressure waves faded, the channel opened back up as the vessel was swallowed by the sea. The ice surrounding the spot where the Endurance had sunk closed in once more, demolishing any trace of the wreck. 8. The submerged archaeological park of Baya, Italy. In the Gulf of Naples in Italy, you can step, or rather dive back in time to the height of the Roman Empire and see what was formerly one of the go-to resorts for rich and influential Romans. The Roman city of Baya was a party paradise, not unlike how many see places like Ibiza today. The historian Seneca noted that there was as much music being played as there were drunk people, and parties were held on boats and villas. It seemed like whatever happened in Baya stayed in Baya. The reason that Baya is now a diving rather than a party hotspot is due to a rather curious phenomenon known as bradyseism. It's a seismic occurrence much like earthquakes. However, while earthquakes occur horizontally, bradyseism happens at a vertical angle, moving the earth up and down. During one of these events, Baya ended up falling under the waves. There are 5 sites of the diving location for you to explore, each one offering a different insight into the Roman city. At Ninfeo di Claudio, you can swim across a paved road and enjoy sights of the foundations of the steam baths and replicas of the elegant statues of the Nymphaeum where Emperor Claudius liked to hang out. Villa a Protiro is one of the most popular spots. The ruins of this old villa have a stunning black and white mosaic floor, which would have once been part of the building's courtyard. Although these are the most notable locations, make sure that if you visit, your guide takes you to see everything this piece of history has to offer. 7. Versenbai Car Piles, Kuraka. If you like vintage motors and scuba diving, then the Versenbai Car Piles in Kuraka are a must-see. An entire barge of 1950s vehicles were taken out into the water off of Versenbai Beach and sunk at the start of the 1970s in order to create an artificial reef to promote the recovery of marine life. It seemed to do a good job because as you dive down to the many cars and trucks scattered on the seabed, you'll see plenty of coral making its home on the vehicle's chassis. You might even spot a moray eel poking out from one of the headlights. One of the top attractions for the divers here is a wreck of a pickup truck which is in great condition, positioned at a horizontal angle into the seafloor. In the back of the truck, its cargo now is a shed load of coral, with fish weaving through it. The cars start to appear once you're roughly 45 feet under the water and continue to emerge the deeper down you swim, so divers need to be aware not to get too carried away. 6. $1 Million Point Vanuatu. $1 Million Point is located on the island of Espiritu Santo in Vanuatu. The dive site is unique not only in its name, but also in what you can find there. To find out how this diving location got its name, we need to rewind to World War II, when the US Army had a base on the island. Located in the Pacific Ocean, it was a perfect place to attack the Japanese forces. As a result, the US fortified the base by creating roads, buildings, and airfields. Although the US was using it as a base of operations, Vanuatu was in fact a territory that was controlled by Britain and France, and at the time was referred to as the condominium of the New Hebrides. We don't know about you, but Vanuatu is much easier to say. As the war came to a close, the Americans needed to figure out what to do with all their stuff. Without plans to take it with them, they needed to find new owners for things such as furniture, clothing, cars, and all their food and drink stores. The best customers for this would be the government of Vanuatu. However, the governing bodies of the country were Britain and France. They thought that they could get an even better price than the rock bottom offer the US gave them, or perhaps if they waited long enough, they'd get it for free. The Americans were having none of this and came up with another plan. They gathered all of the items together at a port on the south of the island, got some bulldozers, and then pushed it all into the sea. The bulldozers followed too. All in all, millions of dollars worth of possessions went into the water, thus why the dive site is named $1 Million Point. Aside from what the locals managed to salvage at the time, divers can make their way through a labyrinth of rusting vehicles, cranes, and the odd Coca-Cola bottle or two. 5. Yonaguni Monument, Japan. In 1986, Kiichiro Arataki discovered the location of the site, although Yonaguni had already become a renowned scuba diving location for Japanese divers looking to view the hammerhead sharks that called the area home in the 1980s. Aratake was looking for new shark hotspots in order to offer tours to fellow divers when he came across a monument towering out of the seabed. Due to its shape, he nicknamed it the Underwater Machu Picchu. Today, locals and visitors call it Kaite Iseki, which means the monument at the bottom of the sea. This is where the debate as to the origin of the site came into play. Many scientists and other academics began to theorize whether this discovery was a natural formation or in fact whether it had been constructed by a long-lost civilization. There's a lot to debate as to whether the site is actually part of the lost continent of Mu, considered by many to be the Atlantis of the Pacific Ocean. In fact, there's been a lot of research done to put stock behind the idea that it is a man-made structure. Masaki Kimura, a professor of marine geology and seismology, has concluded that the 85-tool monument is made of mudstone and sandstone. Not only that, but at the site they found evidence of human habitation, including stone tools for farming, evidence of roads, stone tablets, and even a carved face that bears a resemblance to those found on Easter Island. However, other researchers believe that the site is natural in a sense, as the rocks it's made from can stack in formations such as this. Many don't dispute that humans may have lived there, concluding that the civilization would just have made a few small renovations to the existing natural structure in order to make it habitable. Do you think this monument is a product of ancient engineering or a natural wonder? Let us know which you think it is in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more interesting videos. 4. SS Yongala Australia. On March 23, 1911, the steamship the SS Yongala was sailing through the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. However, the conditions were stormy and a cyclone picked up that led the Yongala to sink beneath the waves. 122 people would lose their lives in the sudden capsizing of the vessel, with many not knowing what might have caused this event to occur so quickly. The ship would go undiscovered for almost 5 decades until it was rediscovered in 1958. Now, the Yongala sits on its side at a depth of 45 feet at the top of the boat and 90 feet to the bottom where it hits the sand of the seabed. Due to the nature in which it capsized, it's one of the most intact vessels in Australian waters, despite the fact that it's over 110 years old. Thanks to the location in which it capsized, the SS Yongala is now a haven for marine life. The entire vessel is encrusted in colorful coral, and many different aquatic species make their home amongst the metal frame. Various rays, sea snakes, barracuda, turtles, and even bull sharks can be found around the wreck. 3. The SS Thistlegor The Red Sea. On October 6, 1941, the SS Thistlegor was preparing to sail through the Suez Canal in Egypt, and had stopped to wait until the all clear to proceed at Shag Rock. The Thistlegor, complete with her cargo of tanks, planes, and other armored vehicles, was struck by 2 long-range bombs from a German vessel. The bombs punched a hole in the port side of the ship, which might have been salvageable. However, they also penetrated through to the storage for the tank ammunition on board, which exploded so violently that the ship split in 2 pieces. Due to the gravity of the blast, the Thistlegor did not take long to sink beneath the waves. Thankfully, only 9 crew members lost their lives, with the rest making it safely off of the ship. SS Thistlegor would sit at the bottom of the Red Sea until it was found by Jacques Cousteau in 1956, 15 years after its demise. From just one man rediscovering it, the ship's wreck now has countless divers visiting it every year, making it one of the most popular diving locations in the world. The traffic through the vessel can get so busy that it can even create air pockets in some areas of the ship. It's easy to see why many people are fascinated with the Thistlegor. Not only does it have a connection to World War II, but it's a treasure trove of artifacts. Aside from those lost in the catastrophic blast back in 1941, there's plenty for you to discover, and a lot of it remains in remarkable condition. Bedford trucks and jeeps remain parked up in the hold, and many of them still have their glass windows and tires still in one piece. Fish swim about stationary motorbikes, and those that feel more adventurous can head to see the bombs, rifles, and ammo stored away in some of the holds. If you wish to see the grisly aftermath of what happened to the Thistlegor after the explosion, head to the middle of the ship. Here, you'll find the metal peeled back from the force of the blast, as if someone has taken a giant can opener to the hull. To show just how massive the blast was, it even managed to send a Bren carrier tank and a train flying, which can be seen to the side of the ship on the seabed. 2. USS Kitewaki, Cayman Islands. The USS Kitewaki is one of the most famous diving spots in the Caribbean. However, it was also a remarkable ship when it was sailing too. The vessel was classed as a submarine rescue ship, and it took its maiden voyage on July 10, 1945. It would remain in service for 49 years before being decommissioned in 1994. Most often, her main duty would be to accompany submarines on training exercises. However, she was also a part of a few historical events. In 1960, Kitewaki provided assistance to the USS George Washington for the first successful launch of a Polaris missile from a submerged submarine. She also helped to rescue Cuban refugees in 1963, some of them being children, taking them to safety. The thing that the USS Kitewaki is known for happened in 1986. The NASA Challenger disaster had just occurred, and officials were frantically searching for the black box from the spacecraft to help them figure out what had caused the tragedy. Out of all the ships sent out by the military and the Coast Guard, it was the Kitewaki that managed to find it. The USS Kitewaki may have ended up sitting in a US dockyard for the rest of her existence until a bid for the ship came in from the Cayman Islands. They wished to add it to one of their artificial reefs and could think of no better ship than the Kitewaki to be the star of their subnautical show. The long process of getting the ship ready began, which meant removing any hazardous materials and making it more accessible to divers by opening up more spaces on the ship. 800 yards off of 7 Mile Beach on Grand Cayman, you can now find the Kitewaki's final resting spot after she was finally sunk in 2011. She's a popular attraction, with many divers exploring her interior and even taking selfies at the captain's wheel. With an abundance of marine life living on and in the vessel, a fabled history, and 5 floors to explore, it's clear to see why this is a diver's paradise. 1. The Zenobia Cyprus. Despite suffering from misfortune on her maiden voyage, the Zenobia now finds fame as one of the top dive sites in the world. She was built in Sweden in 1979, and the RO class ferry was set to make her first journey from Malmo all the way to Tartus in Syria. She was holding a whole range of cargo, many of them heavy vehicles such as forklifts and tractors, among other items. However, the Zenobia never made it to her final destination. When she was in the waters around Cyprus, she began to tilt to one side, which was a resulting problem with her ballasting system, which was distributing water unevenly. She was turned away from the port in Larnaca as they couldn't help. Shortly after 2 in the morning on June 7, 1980, the Zenobia sank about a mile offshore. Her cargo was worth a staggering $221,730,000. This led to a lot of conversation about the true nature of her capsizing. Many people thought that it might have been an attempt at insurance fraud, and the captain taking his own life less than a year after the incident did not help to allay suspicions. Either way, nowadays the Zenobia makes for an amazing diving spot. Not only can you see all of its many millions of dollars worth of cargo, but it's one of the best places in Cyprus to see all sorts of marine life that would normally not be at home there together, such as grouper, barracuda, tuna, turtle, and triggerfish. Which of these dive sites would you want to swim? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!